Welcome, everybody, to panel 2 of the day. We have a very rich and diverse lineup of speakers to focus on the role of environmental sustainability in urban space and in the context of redevelopment, a busy urban area. So we're going to run the panel as follows. I'll briefly introduce all the panelists, and then they will take turn to give some thoughts around the theme from the context of their experience and background for 5-6 minutes, and then we can open up for questions from the audience. So we have Andrew Grieve is a senior air quality analyst at King's College London. Trewin Restorick, he's CEO of Hubbub. Jane Riddiford is founding director of Global Generation. And then we have Craig Miller, project leader, Hertha Week Studio, and Andreas Lang, Central St. Martin's. So without, wasting more of this of time available today, Trevor, you go first. He's going to show us a few slides.
Thank you very much, and lovely to see so many of you here. Yeah, I got the short straw. I'm going first. So I'm the CEO of a charity called Hubbub. We're actually celebrating our 4th birthday today. So Hubbub was set up by me as a sort of midlife crisis with the aim of how to get environmental messages out to a mainstream audience. So we had a set of rules that we wanted to work around. The first one was, let's not talk about the environment, let's talk about what people talk about in the pub. So for us, that's the food they eat, the clothes they wear, their homes, their neighbourhoods. Secondly, we realised that as a small charity, we can't create change on our own, so collaboration is key. Thirdly, let's use really fresh and different behaviour change approaches. Let's measure what we do and openly share so that people can learn from the many mistakes we make and copy the good bits. And finally, we didn't really care if nobody had heard of Hubbub. It was the change that mattered rather than the organisation. So much to my wife's fury, the charity started with £25,000. She said, "You're mad, you're over 50, what are you doing?" And 3 months in, she was right, we were down to £500. And I thought, right again. But anyway, the charity is now at a just over £2 million turnover in 4 years, most of it from corporate funding. So I just wanted to very quickly dash through some examples of what we think businesses, community groups and others can do to sort of create change. And the first thing is, we think you can use nudge techniques to really engage with a big audience. I just wanted to use one example of this. So we looked at Villiers Street, which is a street from King's Cross, from Charing Cross down to the Embankment. It's cleaned 7 times a day. It's the 2nd busiest pedestrian street in London. We watched what happened on the street. The biggest littered item on the street was cigarette butts, mainly by blokes coming out of the pub. So the question we asked was, how do you stop a drunk bloke dropping a cigarette butt on the floor? We didn't think a little sticker would work. So we looked at nudge behaviour change, and we came up with a voting bin. And the first question we asked was, who's the best footballer in the world? Is it Ronaldo or Messi? At the time, it was Messi, so we stacked the bin so that Ronaldo was winning because we wanted to create a conversation. We had Lad's Bible, took a photo of it. We had 76,000 Facebook likes in a day. And then I started to get inquiries from all over the world, Schiphol Airport, stadiums, railway stations saying, can we have the bin, which was a little bit problematic because we only had one. So basically we've created a social enterprise. I think we've sold about 1,400 bins worldwide. And the really interesting thing is everywhere it's gone, it's significantly cut cigarette littering. So it's a very simple example of how you can use nudge to sort of change quite a stubborn problem. And we've had some amazing questions, quite a lot on Brexit, unsurprisingly, and a few like, is Trump's hair real? So think about nudge. Think about collaboration. So there are many problems which are bigger than a company or an organization. So if you collaborate, it's a great way to achieve change. So we've been looking at how you can recycle coffee cups. We started off by placing one big recycling bin in a street in Manchester. First thing we discovered was people were breaking into the bin. We couldn't understand why. And it's because McDonald's have a coupon on their coffee. And they must make really good coffee because people were breaking into the bin to steal them. So we locked it down like Fort Knox. We then found that people were more likely to recycle if the bin was yellow than white. So we learned a lot. And then we took the whole campaign to the heart of London. We've recycled over 6 million cups from the centre of London. And interestingly, what's happened is that now there's sufficient recycling facilities in the UK to recycle all our coffee cups. Costa are putting in £70 a tonne for each tonne of cups, so it's now economically viable. And with Starbucks, we've been testing what will happen if you charge people. And what we discovered is that if you give people a 25p discount, about 2% of people bring in a reusable cup. If you then say there's a 5p charge, about 8% of people do. So the Brits don't like to be taxed. And we did that initially in 36 stores. Starbucks have now extended it to all of their stores. They've had no kickback on sales. It's had very positive response, and the money they generate is donated to our charity to run more campaigns. And then you can do stuff, and this I think is really important for somewhere like King's Cross, on a really local level. So a lot of retailers in this area will have perishable food like fruit, veg, bakery stuff that at the end of the day they're throwing away. So we've created a community fridge network, which is basically industrial-sized fridges and freezers that take food that would have been thrown away, perishable food, and then make it freely available to the local community. It's not like a food bank. There's no sort of rules about who can and cannot take it. We wanted to remove any stigma. Actually, the people who use the fridges tend to be those who desperately need it. But it's a really interesting example of how you can put in a community facility that reduces food waste, brings people together. Each fridge, we've got about 36 of them now, is saving about half a tonne of perishable food a month. And the network's going to grow to about 50 fridges. So that's something that could definitely happen in the locality. Be topical. So with mother care, we know that lots of people have beautiful outgrown children clothing sitting in their wardrobes. So with mother care, we invited parents to come together to create gift bundles for children, take them to the mother care store, and then they're gifted on Mother's Day as a gift from a mother to another. So a really nice campaign about bringing the community together, helping those people who need support, and actually increase footfall into mother's care stores at a time when they really need to do this. And then finally, think about stories and narratives. And the example I wanted to give was plastic fishing. So we collected a whole load of plastic bottles from the Ride event in Green Park, took them up to Scotland, turned them into plastic planks, brought them all the way back down to Richmond in London, gave them to this maverick boat builder who built the Queen's Barge. He built a punt, an old-fashioned boat design, 99% recycled plastic. And then we're now using it around Docklands to take children plastic fishing, fishing plastics out of the river. So it teaches them about the value of plastics if recycled and the impact if it goes into the natural environment. And we've also offered that to corporates as a team-building exercise, and the money we make from that enables us to provide free trips to the school children. So that circular story is really great. We've collected enough plastics to build another boat, which is in Richmond, and we've just commissioned a third boat, and we'll be running a competition very soon to give that boat away to a community that needs it most. So those are sort of a very quick snippet of examples of what businesses can do in a positive way to engage people in the environmental debate. Thank you.
Hello, great to be here with you all, especially in King's Cross. We're very much a King's Cross-based organisation. Global Generation moved onto the King's Cross estate before any of the business occupiers were there. It was just us and the building contractors and the young people we brought on site. And we discovered that actually our building site was a fantastic place to deliver our aims, because it's, you would say to a young person, what does this represent? And they would see that it represents the future, and they had a role in creating it. So our aims are twofold. One is very much about supporting children and young people to be catalysts for positive change, and the other aim is around involving people of all ages in the natural environment. We do have a campsite in the middle of the countryside on an organic farm, and where we take young people from the city, but very much it's about actually can that change of perspective that they get when they suddenly build a relationship with the natural world, how can that make a difference to the places where they and many of us live? So we have the skip garden has evolved over time. It's moved around different parts of King's Cross. It started opposite St Pancras station, and now it's just beyond Cubitt Park, and it will move again in the future, but that's very much our home base. We also are opening up a new project with the British Library, and that will be called the Story Garden. And then we have a project down in Southwark called the Paper Garden in what was the Daily Mail print works. So I suppose a feature of our work is choosing, in some ways, quite unlikely places to do this work of bringing out the life beneath the concrete. And I would say that's literally in places, but that's also very much inside people. So opening the creative potential that's in everybody to grow a different kind of future. And our educational work sits within an umbrella that we call I, we, and the planet. So it's very practical and hands-on, but it's also very reflective. So young people get experiences around confidence and exposure to business and all those wonderful things about being part of King's Cross. But they also get a different experience of themselves. I mean, many of the young people who get involved with us, at the beginning they would say to me, "We don't do dirt, miss." But actually, after not very long, they build a relationship with the soil, with the plants, and with the incredible creativity that is inherent in a garden and inherent in all of us. And as part of that perspective shifting exercise, we also expose them to the notion of long time. So arguably, our timescales have got smaller and smaller and smaller. People talk about a 3-year plan, or they talk about our lifetimes. So how do we open up a meaningful connection to 7, 10, 20 generations ahead? And one of the ways that we do that is by giving a sense that where we've all come from, how we have evolved out of the earth, out of the wider scientific story of the cosmos. And it's fantastic to see that shift of perspective in a young person when they connect with that. We had one young teenager, her name was Hafsa, and she suddenly connected that it took a very, very long time for her to be here. And she turned to me and she said, "I always thought I was an uncommitted person, but now I know how much it took to make me, and I'm a unique expression of life. So I know that commitment is boiling in my blood, and my role is to contribute to the future." So I would say the I part of our work is also about re-identifying ourselves as part of a evolving creative story that's still in the making. And the we is very much about community, so the work is very much about community building, which is what a garden is all about, what ecology is all about. And that sense of community, which is not just between the very diverse groups of people in King's Cross, but between all of us, soils, waters, plants, and animals, that we are part of a connected story. And in terms of the planet side of things, it's all the very practical things we can do to make a difference. So for us, those are all sorts of activities that come out of the garden. So growing and cooking and eating together and seed saving. And a very exciting initiative that's come quite recently is doing a lot with ceramics through a wonderful collaboration we have with Central St. Martin's. And a lot of our work has grown out of the different collaborations we've had in King's Cross. So we actually do have a kiln in the skip garden, and it's not your normal just turn the electric switch kiln. It's a wood-fired kiln. So again, it brings a whole sense of ritual and ceremony, and those things that early peoples who lived closer to the earth and had a more natural relationship to the soil and the seeds and the seasons, the ways they came together. And so naturally storytelling is also a very big part of our practice. And I think we're living in a really exciting time, particularly in King's Cross, because there's such a sense of change. And how can we recontextualize some of those older ways of being, if you like, where there was much more of a knowledge of our custodianship with the planet, and we bringing them into a very urban environment. So yeah, it's a delight to work here, and it's a delight to be here with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane,
Thank you.
for a very inspiring chat. And now we have Andreas.
Hello. I don't have slides. I can hardly see you. So I do this. So thank you very much for inviting us here. I'm part of Central St. Martin's, which is the art school just up the road of, I think, 4,000 students, 50 courses. And I'm part of one of the departments called Spatial Practices. I myself teach the MA in Architecture. The term spatial practice kind of already suggests that we are interested in a wider understanding of the term architecture, to really kind of explore the agency that an architect might have. A lot of the students that come into our course, they have spent several years out working in architecture, and to many degrees are a little bit disheartened by how little agency they have. They're very idealistic, they want to affect change, but don't necessarily have the kind of field in which they can do it. So they come with a lot of questions on how they can use their time here at Central St. Martin's in King's Cross to position themselves on a pathway that can actually, where they can act upon some of the urgencies they feel. So architecture in that sense for us is extremely outward looking. It's already, it's political, it has a kind of social and spatial responsibility towards spatial justice. And our work is really to kind of guide students towards a kind of pathway where they have more control, I guess, in how to affect not only their career, but also the values they want to promote through architecture or through spatial projects. We do this in many different ways. One of the ways is group work, which it's already been hinted on. There's always a strong desire to be involved locally. They're quite aware that they're at the center. They're the young, fresh-looking people in the center of this new regeneration scheme called King's Cross. And they're quite aware that they want to understand who's around them and how can they build a dialogue. So in the summer, which is one example, we worked not only with the ceramics department in the college, but also with the skip garden, building a new facility in the garden, but trying to do things from scratch. So we started to dig clay at the Google headquarters, understanding how to process it, getting really hands-on involved with the material and the kind of understanding the kind of wider implications where material is being produced, what environmental impact it has, how much energy it actually needs to do it. But along these making processes, you form a lot of relationships. You form a kind of quite in-depth understanding of the impact the environment has, but also the kind of working environment and the decision you make as an architecture has on the ground. Beyond that, we really encourage the students to go out, to be outside, and to form links, form relationships, and to understand themselves already as a young practitioner, not to retreat behind the computer screen where they can imagine wonderful worlds which may never come true, but already test these ideas outside. Who could they do it with? How could they build these new forms of practice, and how could they change behavior through small steps? And over the course of 2 years, they built quite substantial networks, built quite new practices or approaches towards how they can create space. Another example is an ongoing collaboration with the British Museum and the Skip Garden to British Library, sorry, to build a kind of makerspace and garden. And again, these are kind of small steps where you have to kind of mobilize a lot of people. But it gives the students a sense of direct involvement, which is quite important. And I think that changes their attitude towards how they can take influence and affect change. I think that's it. Yeah.
Morning all. I've got some slides because I've got some graphs, lots of graphs. I knew you were looking forward to some graphs. It's easier to show a graph than to kind of act it out. My name's Andrew. I'm an air pollution researcher at King's College. And I'm going to talk about a project very local to here. Most of the presentations I do, I start off with this slide. It's one of my favorite slides of pollution in London. It helps kind of us get an idea of what we're talking about here. This was taken a couple of years ago from South London, looking northwards. This is a classic kind of wintertime pollution episode where we have an inversion, so the air is colder at the bottom, near to the ground, and then there's a layer of warm air above it trapping all of that lovely, beautiful alpine air near the bottom. Now, this is a mixture of nitrogen dioxide and fine particles, and these are the two pollutants that we're mainly talking about day to day that you'll hear, health research for in the press. I'm going to go through these really quickly. Some of you might have seen this map before. This is produced by my modelling colleagues at King's for the Mayor. This is a map of nitrogen dioxide as a kind of as an annual average. Basically, anything that's yellow or above is above the legal limit. And you can see where we are here in central London. Obviously, all of central London's above the 40 microgram limit. But the thing I wanted to concentrate on was that if you zoom in and take a closer look on some of the detail, you can see that, particularly with nitrogen dioxide, it's concentrated on the road network, and it kind of drops away quite significantly when you get away from the road network. And that's important. What I wanted to talk about was this project called the Wellbeing Walk, which Urban Partners created in 2015. They had this idea of creating this kind of low pollution walking route between Euston and King's Cross. Now, obviously, like every day, there are thousands of people that walk between Euston and King's Cross along the Euston Road. And the Euston Road, as we saw, is horrible. This is a wellbeing walk that's kind of one block back from Euston Road. And they came to us and said, could you do some monitoring of this? Can we find out kind of what the pollution difference is between the two roads? It's only really in the last few years that monitors have got to the point where they're kind of small enough and accurate enough and the battery lasts all day where we can kind of carry them around. So these are the monitors we used, these little black carbon monitors. This is me and Uto monitoring it. So what we did was we did this a few times, but we started off together at Euston Station, then we swapped around so that it wasn't like one person doing the high pollution route and one person doing the lovely low pollution route all the time. We swapped it around, but we walked in parallel and then met up at the other station and walked back and did it a few times, so we got a decent amount of data. That's us meeting up at King's Cross at the end. This is data from one of the runs, and you can see kind of quite a big difference between the Euston Road and the Wellbeing Walk. These instruments produce a reading every minute. This is a result of we did it several times and we took an average. And basically, the pollution levels that we measured on the Wellbeing Walk were about 50% lower than the Euston Road, which is fantastic. This is it's a really great idea. Urban Partners came up with this kind of completely by themselves. They already had the signposting, they already had the branding, they already had the kind of like the whole media plan of how to promote it. It was really, really fantastic. This is a little plot of some of the data. You can kind of see the difference between the two routes. This was the launch day, which was really fantastic. Loads of local school kids were there. Some folks from the JLA, there's me in the middle. This is more pictures from the launch day. Since then, lots of people thought, well, that's a really good idea, maybe we could do that. The really great thing about it is that it doesn't really require much infrastructure. You just need some signposts. I mean, obviously, you could put more. The idea was to kind of develop the route and put, some planting in and some infrastructure and help regenerate the shops that are on that route. And so these have sprung up right across. Well, I've been doing loads of them. This is Euston to Regent's Park, another selfie. This is Warren Street to Regent's Park, another graph, another selfie. This is Covent Garden to Embankment, another graph, another selfie. I should have done a graph of selfies, actually. So these low pollution walking routes have sprung up across the city, which is really fantastic. What started out here, what started out at Urban Partners, has blossomed across the city, and we're doing another 6 or 7, monitoring another 6 or 7 wellbeing walks now as we speak. This is a little low pollution route finder gadget that we've got on a few of the Business Improvement District websites now, where you can plot in a low pollution route, and you can also see where these low pollution routes exist already. If you click on them, you get a bit of information about them. I was going to finish by saying pollution is a function of emissions and exposure. So our exposure, all of our exposure here today will be different, because all of us had different routes here. We're going to have different rest of days. All of our exposure routes, our exposures today will be different, and tomorrow will be different. But it's related, obviously, to the amount of pollution in the air. Reducing exposure is an important thing to do. And all of us kind of have agency to do that. There's probably something that we can do in our daily lives to reduce exposure. And these wellbeing walks are a great example of that, of kind of moving people away from the pollution. But they don't on their own reduce the overall pollution levels. We have to tackle the emissions as well. Tackling the emissions, it takes a long time. Even if the government introduces its internal combustion engine ban in 2040, as it proposes, there will still be cars that are bought on the 31st of March 2040, which will be on the road for another 10 or 15 years. So that takes time. But what we can do as individuals, and what business improvement districts can do in businesses, is focus on, try to reduce our exposure at the same time as we're reducing emissions as well, because reducing emissions reduces exposure for everyone. But the two go hand in hand. That's me.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to be here. My name is Craig Miller. I'm a project leader and architect at Heatherwick Studio. Heatherwick Studio has been based in the King's Cross area for the last 17 years, and our base today is just at the north end of Gray's Inn Road. And so we've been lucky enough to both witness and participate in the incredible rejuvenation of King's Cross as an area, both as people who work here, but also many of us live locally too. Our work is focused around the urban environment predominantly, and our team is made up of not just architects and designers, but makers and thinkers, and we collectively call ourselves problem solvers. And we are about 200 now, and although we operate worldwide, we are increasingly engaging in London, notably Coaldrops Yard, which opened formally just a week or so ago. We are also co-designing the current Google headquarters in King's Cross, as well as just submitting a planning application for the Olympia London Exhibition Centre, which is a huge West London Victorian exhibition centre, and that is reinventing itself for the next 100 years. The amazing thing about working in London is that the sites are inherently imbued with amazing character and identity. Sometimes that's hidden. And our task, we see, is either to retain, rediscover, or indeed reinvent those identities. And to link that to sustainability, we see sustainability as coming down to relevance, really. Successful places are relevant places, and we question what is a relevant place in today's society and what will be relevant in the years to come. And we measure that not through, or we measure the success or failure of that not through metrics, but through feelings. Do people want to come to your area? Do they want to stay there? Do they want to live there? Do they want to linger there? Do you want to bring your children? Do you feel safe? Is it clean? And for us, that's not just focused on individual buildings or individual pieces of the urban environment. It's that shared space. It's the shared environment that is key to us. And that factors into how we design and how we think about buildings and the space around the buildings. And so even if our work is focused on a particular site through a particular ownership, we're fascinated and passionate about the contribution that our design and that building or that place makes to that shared urban environment. So it's a short introduction to what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. So we have now time for questions. Please do use the microphone and introduce briefly yourself. Microphones are on their way. While you warm up, I can ask a question to the panel. So we keep the conversation going. So we heard very different presentations about, the importance of the connection between people, the connection between people and the environment, the connection between people, the environment, and the infrastructure, and the space. So from all the different point of view, it feels like a central theme is actually change here. It's either changing behavior, changing the way we think about the space, and how we design it. And so could you summarize briefly, each one of you, with a few keywords? What are the triggers of change based on your experience? Who wants to go first?
You should choose an order.
Okay, so Jane, do you want to go first?
You used the word connection, and I think like a meaningful sense of connection. So I think we have to bring in lots of different ways of knowing, not just knowledge about the state of the planet, but arts, emotion, feeling, so that actually we feel related to the planet as we would our own small child. And there's something around intimacy, and that we have a historical, if you like, I think we're all standing in the legacy of the Cartesian split. There you have it, that, modernism was predicated on land and the planet as a neutral substrate that we could harvest for productivity, and fantastic productivity. So much came out of it. But now we have to reintegrate that actually land and the planet is more than just a source of product. It is a part of ourselves. So that's where I would say change comes from, a re-identification of self with the planet and the environment.
Thank you. Trevor?
So change at a systemic level comes when a whole load of different things unite, I think. So around sustainability, we have had such a wake-up call from the world this year. We had an IPCC report came out a month ago saying basically got 12 years to keep runaway climate change intact. We know that plastics in the ocean is a growing problem, and then it takes a national treasure like David Attenborough to open the floodgates. And what you see is those sort of things build concern amongst society, they create movements, and when that happens, businesses always seem to move first. A business needs a license to operate, it wants to attract the best people, it wants to be around in years to come. So businesses react very quickly when they see those things happening. Local authorities, they move fairly quickly. and then our politicians are in a complete logjam at the moment, as I think we all recognise. So what we're seeing is we're seeing change being led by the science, by people's concerns, by businesses' response, and we're actually at the moment hitting this logjam of political ineptitude, really, to create the change at scale. And somehow we've got to break through that to use all of the information that's being driven at the moment to create the systemic change we need to create a more sustainable future.
Andreas?
Yeah, I mean, we are an educational institution, so I see it in the students. I think there are two components. One is that they have a critical and informed understanding of a context, and that they're rigorous in that understanding. But I guess the other one is that they find and I mentioned it, that they find a way how to act on their urgencies in a way, and how to empower them to act. So the critical understanding of the context is important, that you're not naively going into this. But I think the connectedness resonates, the idea that you find solidarities or communities of practice that kind of support you in pursuing something that often is maybe an intuitive starting point, that you feel we have to find a way to change that idea how we practice architecture, for example. So yeah, I think research and solidarity networks are quite important.
Brilliant. Craig?
Yeah, I think it comes down to value and the perceptions of value. And as a practicing architect, fascinated by how we design and how long we design for. And in recent years, it's become a shorter and shorter life cycle of building that we're designing for. And so how we design and build those short cycle buildings is massive, has a massive impact on the environment. But also the use that we're designing for, in the past it was dedicated and specific, and as the economy moved on, our culture moved on, those buildings became disused or abused and abandoned. And the incredible thing about some of the industrial buildings of the past was that they are able to cater for new use, and we're able to reuse those. And so I think there's lessons there in designing for longer life cycles, but designing in inherent flexibility and a degree of what we call loose fitness, so that buildings have a relevance for longer term, and are cherished over the longer term, and that they don't fall into disuse or abandonment. And I think that sense of change, or trying to design and foresee change, is crucial.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Andrew?
Well, I work in an academic department in a university. And so obviously teaching is part of what we do. Another big component of what we do is writing papers and submitting them for peer review and them getting published in journals. And that's really important. That's a really important part of science. That's how science happens. And it's really important that, you know, we produce a graph and that's looked at by someone else, and they say, yep, you've got that right, and you know, eventually it makes it into the paper. We had a paper published yesterday in The Lancet, and that will get good coverage, and some people will read that, but most of the papers we produce are in journals that no one will ever read. One of the other things we do, and I think this is really crucial, is that we work with people on the ground as well. We have to. It's not enough. It's really important to do published papers and graphs and stuff in journals, but it's not on its own enough. So one of the projects we're doing is we work with the construction industry, and we work with them on the ground, looking at the best way for dust suppression techniques at construction sites. And then industry learns from that. The stuff I do around kind of personal monitoring and behaviour change around commuting and these wellbeing walks. We work with local authorities on the ground, obviously testing you know, which kind of, you know, measures on the ground for reducing traffic flow and et cetera work, so that the officers have got the best data to kind of implement change on the ground. We're a small group, we're only 15 of us, so there's a limit to how much we can do on our own, but I think that combination of, you know, writing kind of peer-reviewed scientific articles, but also working with people on the ground, who then eventually, and we're starting to see kind of the seeds of what we're doing with people blossom out. It has to be ultimately the people on the ground wanting to affect change and doing it themselves. So I mean, I guess that's the thing that we all have in common, is that we work with people on the ground in communities to affect change that we hope then kind of gradually snowballs and gets change over time.
Bottom-up approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Any questions? Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if this is a question or a comment that could be responded to. I mean, I grew up in the King's Cross area. I worked for 20 years in Maria Fidelis School. I was head of geography there. I now work in a very well-to-do independent school in Ealing, which has got the largest school grounds imaginable. But I know what it's like to work in Maria Fidelis and to be part of the Somerstown community, because I just lived on the other side of the Euston Road whilst I worked there. But anyway, my point is this. The Wellbeing Walk is a great idea. It's something that people who have worked in Maria Fidelis have known about, that little cut-through, for an infinite amount of years. But in terms of the economic regeneration of Somerstown that Wellbeing Walk might affect, I do believe there are certain barriers there, because there is actually one cafe and one convenience store in the map that you showed, and there is no other place that could turn into shops along there, because it's all housing estates or educational establishments. So I think that nice little cut through for people who want to walk from Euston to St. Pancras and vice versa is actually quite limited in what it could actually affect, unless a huge amount of government investment goes into the area without expecting any financial return back. I mean, that's the first point. And the second point is that I do feel that Somerstown is a bit of an island of urban deprivation, and it can be delimited by the Midland Road, by Crowndale Road, by Eversholt Street, and by the Euston Road. And I really, really can't see how all of these projects, unless they're really well funded, unless they're really well connected, can bring about such a monumental change, because it has barriers to change that other areas don't have. And if I can link it to the architecture point of view, the reason why that area can't be gentrified or receive any of the benefits of gentrification, which I know is a contentious issue anyway, but the reason it can't is because the housing stock is so poor. If you look at parts of London that have been regenerated successfully, it's because to attract people from the outside in to mix with the community and integrate into the community, there must be a place that they are willing to buy. And there are no, apart from a small line of Georgian houses round the side of West South Camden Community School, which I think is called Regent's High now, apart from that range of shops, there's just no way anybody might come in to live in that area. They will in the periphery of that area, the other side of Euston Station, the other side of the Euston Road, on the Islington side, this side behind us in York Way. But Somerstown itself, how do we stop that from remaining being an island of urban deprivation?
Thank you very much. Do you have any reflections on it?
Thank you. I mean, you covered a lot of points, and I don't pretend to have I couldn't answer all of them, but I would just like to share one thing, that is the collaboration we're doing with Central St. Martin's, so which will enable us to do a lot more in Somerstown collectively and bring our various partners with us. So both on the British Library site, so between the Crick and the British Library. There's an acre of ground, so we're developing a meanwhile garden there with the makerspace in it. But that's the beginning of a number of initiatives through Somerstown, including on what was the former Maria Fidelis site in West Euston. And really very much in the spirit of what we do, taking a bottom-up iterative approach that brings the community with it in an iterative process. And the hope and the aspiration is that we will find out together over time what is really needed. I don't pretend that we'll address everything that's needed, and there are so many contentious changes happening in the area, but we are looking for the sweet spots to bring the community with us.
Thank you, Jane.
No, I would take one point. I don't think necessarily the idea of private home ownership is the answer. So one.
Gentrification is a really contentious issue anyway.
Yeah.
But in terms of bringing money into the area in that way.
Can you speak on the microphone? Sorry.
The thing, my point is that in terms of bringing money into the area that way, or mixing up the people that live there so that there's more of an interface between newer arrivals and the people that are originally from there, that doesn't seem to be a vehicle, that doesn't seem to be a way that it can happen, because people can't come into the area because they haven't got any place that they can buy. I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm just saying that what has happened in other parts of London, you know, doesn't seem to be possible there.
I guess one thing we do is that we open, like in terms of the lecture or the involvement that we do, we try to explore alternative models of development. And I think in just the north of Summertown is a very big community land trust, which is mixed use between industrial and residential. And I think these models need to be discussed and promoted. And I think that's where we have an important role, I would say.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Can we take just another question very quickly and keep it brief and speak with the microphone, please?
Hi, my name's Susie Barber and I'm from Age UK Camden, and I was interested, Truin, about you saying your charity is now funded entirely by corporates, which is fantastic, so well done for that. And I wondered how much those corporates market their support of you, because I think it's really good when businesses do invest in the local community, and by that is local charities, and in a meaningful way, which is with, at the end, money, so that you can deliver these fantastic projects that you want to, that you're actually doing. That takes money, but it's about also businesses understanding that support has to be in a meaningful way and part of their operations, and it not just being a marketing issue, and it's not just half a day of volunteering per employee a year. And I personally want to put my money with businesses that do invest in society and do put back. And I think lots of other people feel like that too, but we don't always know which businesses are doing that. And I always say to businesses that support us, do share how you support us on your social media and on your website, so that people can know the effort you are putting into supporting charities like us. So I did wonder how much the corporates that support your charity get involved with you and share your good news stories.
So I think, you partly hit the answer with your question, which is that there is definitely a desire, particularly amongst sort of younger generations, for proof of authenticity. So I think a lot of businesses now know that the days of sort of green frost are not around, because they get shouted out, and they actually get shouted out very quickly and very loudly on social media. So I think that's changed the dynamic. It's always difficult when somebody's giving somebody money and somebody's receiving it, in terms of creating equality of partnership. But I think the way that we work with businesses is we work with businesses where we know that there's a joint ambition, where what they're trying to achieve aligns with us. We try and do it as collaboratively as possible, and we always try and point out that it's the end game that's important. So a lot of the businesses we work with, we actually say, you know, operate under a different brand. So the coffee shop campaign, we're just running a big campaign in Leeds called Leeds by Example about boosting recycling on the high street. That's all done under the Leeds by Example hashtag, or the branding is bright yellow Leeds by Example. So all the coffee chains, Starbucks, Costa, the retail outlets involved, Marks and Spencer's and Morrison's and others, they're all using that standard message because that's the change that needs to happen. People need to be encouraged to recycle more, and we need a connectivity. So actually the conversations we have with a lot of businesses, we want to put a totally different set of branding into your stores, which is quite difficult, but they do get it and they are responding. So I think we're making progress, but every company's different, every company is siloed, and sometimes you don't find out till 3 or 4 months in about what their true intentions are, which is when it gets difficult.
Thank you very much. We definitely are running out of time now, so we need to bring this session to an end, but some of our panelists will stay a little bit through the break, so if you have more questions, you can reach out to them during the lunch and refreshment. Thank you very much for coming.